Well, thank you for coming. My name is Sergio Monsalve, and I'm a founding partner of Robel Ventures, which is early stage venture firm focused on both the US and LATAM as well. We have, I think, about 7 or 8 companies in our portfolio that are LATAM based, and then a handful of others in the US, mainly around what we call human enablement technologies, which includes anything application layer software, consumer enterprise for upskilling, reskilling, education, as well as jobs and workplace productivity. So it's a broader theme. And so I'm super excited and humbled to be with these 3 great women. We were going to have Marco as well, but he couldn't make it due to a knee injury. So I'm super excited to have them here. What I was going to do is just have us introduce ourselves, and then we had some specific questions, like we said, and we'll make it interactive. I'll sort of surprise them with extra questions that were not part of the script. So why don't you take it away, Marta, and then Mariana and Sullyen, why don't you follow up and describe your firm and what you do and what you're focused on.
So hi everyone, my name is Marta, and I'm the co-founder of Ubits. Ubits is an upskilling and reskilling platform from Latin America. Right now we are in 11 countries, and we work mainly with most of the companies in Latin America. So that's what we do.
Hi, well, thank you for being here. We know it's Tuesday afternoon and everybody's thinking about the white wine, so thank you for making the effort and coming. My name is Mariana. I lead Laboratoria. We are a nonprofit focused on training women that haven't been able to start a professional career yet to learn coding skills and then go on and build amazing careers in the sector.
Great. So thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm Sullyen. I'm a principal at Monashees. Monashees, we are a pioneer venture capital fund in Latin America. We have physical presence in São Paulo, Mexico, but also in the US. We have 91 portfolio companies active, 200 founders very engaged in our community. We have captured around 30% of the companies that are valued above $1 billion in the region. Mostly we're a very generalistic fund, but we do invest in the major problems and root opportunities in Latin. So EdTech is one of them. We are very passionate about the sector, and we have been investing on specifically the sector since 2009, and the firm were founded in 2005. So we have more than 18 years, almost 18 years already in the market. So thank you again for being here, and it's a pleasure to be on a panel with you guys. Thank you.
Great. So we have panelists here from obviously Brazil and so in Spanish-speaking LATAM. So we got a good variety here, and also we are hopefully covering through Monashees efforts as well at K through 12 higher ed and lifelong learning. So we kind of have the spectrum of all of the things that we focus on. Before we jump, I do want to double click on your profiles a little bit, because I noticed I teach a class at Stanford on education tech. I noticed there's a couple of you from my class, so it's a little nerve-wracking for me. I'll try to do a good job. There is a question that I often get that's related to your profile. That's why I will do that before we jump into your businesses and other questions. Tell us how you got here, from, sort of a little bit your trajectory and how you became an entrepreneur, and also how you became an investor, because I think the trajectory is also kind of interesting from career development perspective.
So I have been in EdTech for since 2010, I think. I started building my own university, online university, when I was 24. And I was crazy back then in Colombia, because I wanted to be like a huge university to upskill people. And I passed 4 years of my life trying to build it. Back then, there were no venture capital, there wasn't a lot of investment, so I was a little lost. But I had all of the platforms and all of the ideas of building a big EdTech in LATAM, because there was and there is a lot of opportunities in our area. So then I met Sullyen in a library. We had no common friends nor anything, and he was a teacher back then at the university. And we knew that there was a huge opportunity on building this. Then a couple of years later, we pivot into Ubits, what is today. because we needed a more scalable solution for all of the employees in Latin America. We saw Coursera, we saw Udemy, they were training our employees in English. So what we saw was a huge opportunity to train people in Spanish with technology, with soft skills, with a lot of things. So that's why I'm here. But we had been in EdTech for a long ago, like working on it. So this is my and I think I have in my veins being an entrepreneur, like since the beginning, and that's it.
For me, I would say it was a bit of a random path with lots of luck in the way. I actually always wanted to work in the social impact space. I studied social and economic development. I worked for a multilateral organization for many years. And then I did my master's, a program in public administration, so I was thinking what I will do, maybe go and work at the World Bank, at the UN, at the Peruvian government. Nothing more distant than entrepreneurship from that world, no? So it clearly wasn't in my plans. But then when I was living in the US, I wanted to move back to Peru, and I got married in the US, and my husband, he was actually a programmer back then, so I was thinking, okay, how do I convince him to leave New York and move to Lima, no? And as I always say, we have great food in Lima, but it's tough to compete with Manhattan. So we said, okay, maybe it's an opportunity to start something of our own, no? Starting a company in Peru will be so much more affordable and viable than doing that in New York. So that's kind of how I first got into the idea of building something. And then a friend of us joined, and we wanted to build something that combined technology and social impact, but had no clue how to do that. We ended up building a digital agency, like a web shop, to basically get clients and do websites and survive and this was back in 2013, so it was a very different ecosystem. And it was through that experience of building our own web shop that we kind of realized, oh, it's really hard to find talented software developers. There's no women, and there's a huge opportunity in education. So maybe we could go and try building a program so that we can ourselves train more women to become software developers, no? And that's how I got into the world of education.
Nice. So I have the other side of the table background. So for me, I'm in industrial engineering as a background, but I never worked in the industry. I fell in love with technology and entrepreneurship, I think, since the very young. My father is an entrepreneur, and he started to sell computers very, very early on in Almeida, which is a small city in the state of São Paulo. And I had access to internet super early on. I was just like telling my mom today after the panels that we had yesterday in AI was definitely mind-blowing. But for me, it was always about like seizing the best opportunity in the region. And I was always very passionate about that. So I think even though I didn't know what it was venture capital when I joined Monashees in 2015, it was like clearly for me that they were helping people using technology to disrupt industries, help companies, and help people's lives. And I think one other very important point for me was being true to their values. So I think on this type of VC, I really noticed that the people there made me stay. So I'm there for 8 years already. So people usually say that takes 7 years for you to be a good venture capitalist. So I think for me, it's getting almost there already. And in EdTech, I has been very passionate because the opportunities that I had, I think it made me here. So I did 1 year of my major throughout a government sponsorship in the US. So I think like the English and learning more about the ecosystem there really makes the total difference for me when I started being a venture capitalist. But also this other entrepreneurial side from my family, I think brings a lot of empathy. And when we think about that, we are more diversified. The entrepreneurs are, like, you see the passion that they speak about their trajectory here, and it's much different. And when you find that type of motivation, I think for me is one of the most amazing things. Even though we don't have like any specific course or venture capital, I think it's just like helping people and understand what kind of technology can truly make the difference and an impact. Even though we are not an impact fund, we do invest in companies that had a neutral or a positive impact. So I think that's, for me, it's also something that made me very passionate about education, but also future of work, other technologies like bringing better opportunities to the region. And when we think about Latam and the huge gap that we still have, like we see amazing people going to Stanford, other universities, and now starting companies and getting back to the region. I think that's the most amazing things that we're starting to see more and more as of now.
Great. No, I'm pretty inspired. That's good. Let's start with you, Sullyen, because I want to take a step back and look at the big picture of LATAM, especially given we are in the middle of sort of a big downturn, right? And I always, growing up in Mexico, I always heard the term like when what is it in, I know it in Spanish, when the U.S. sneezes, LATAM gets a cold or something like that,
Yeah.
right? Something like that. So it doesn't seem like that should be the case this time around. I know I saw it in 2010, I saw it in 2001, but it feels different now. So I want to take a picture back. It's like, why LATAM and why now from a big picture perspective? And also from your point of view, you have a very differentiated approach to the market. So I want to kind of probe into the opportunities that you see, but why don't you start us off?
Yeah, amazing. I think while it became pretty clear in the past years that we had an amazing type of funding that we had in the region the past 2 years. Definitely Latam became a huge region on the map. Several funds started dedicating capital to the region in the past 2 years. And I think fewer funds then that have invested like major rounds, they probably are more skeptical right now. But an amazing thing that happened and is still happening is that we have more funds, more capital available, not only for the usual suspects or big venture capitalists, but we have now more verticalized funds, impact funds. We also have corporate venture capital. So it's definitely the availability of capital is different than it was in previous cycles, 2010, 2016. And finally, we have now on the other side, which is the human capital. We have more prepared entrepreneurs now. So after the first cycles of liquidity that we had in the past 2 years, we had entrepreneurs that sold their company and they're starting the second or third venture again. And we see in our own portfolio, I think I just saw this number, 70% of founders or experienced founders that had worked in previous tech companies before, even in the region or in the US or abroad, and came back to really make an impact there. So I think we have now more capital available, for sure, like not like we had in the past 2 years, because there was definitely an outlier. But if we see the numbers, it's still catching up with the number that we had in 2019. And in comparison, the early stage, like pre-seed, seed, and Series A is the same level that we had in 2021 and 2022. So it's pretty resilient. What we saw a major hit was more in Series Bs and beyond. So I think funding new companies that will eventually become bigger, it's still something that the region is seeing that is much different than it was in previous cycles. So I think capital, the human capital available also, but we had the pandemic. So I think it represented an amazing opportunity for several regions. Like if you look at the number of companies that Latam has, and every single thing that, every single business that needs to have a more digital presence. People need to become more familiar with digital technologies. The tech gap is huge. Like if we think about numbers of developers or data scientists, or I think now like low code and no code and new tools. So we have a lot, like 200 million people. We are one of the most amazing, #1 markets for several global companies, Google, Facebook, TikTok, Shein, Alibaba, many others that are coming too. So I think once we start flipping the switch and really start building the great technologies that we think, then we are super bullish that is definitely going to come in the next 7 to 10 years, we're going to start producing amazing technologies from Latam to serve the region. We have been amazing consumers, but we need to now start building solutions and be more ambitious and start delivering that to the world. So I think like going back to building Latam, being super cost conscious, we now have amazing talent, we have more capital, so we need the ambition, and now we can scale more global.
Yeah. How about you, Mariana and Marta?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we are a region with tons of problems and challenges, that on the other side of every problem and challenge, there's an opportunity, no? And in my case, I think one of the opportunities that we saw is that in the past few decades, Latin America has seen the rate of access to higher education increased dramatically, and that's very important and very significant because higher education has traditionally been that path to provide youth with a better opportunity, and also to turn our economies into much more productive economies. But particularly in my country, but I know this is the case in many others, in the past 10 to 15 years, the return of higher education has actually gone down because of the propagation of lower quality alternatives. And this is something that I saw as one of the main, it's not even a challenge, it goes beyond that, like injustices that was going on, because so many young people, and I remember very well one of our students earlier in our days sharing her story about how going to accessing university is this dream, not only for yourself, but for your family. Lots of resources go into that. It's a huge effort, hoping for a better future. And then you end up going to a school that really has made no efforts to be connected to market demand, is not accountable for your education actually translating into a better job opportunity. And we saw this huge, just something is wrong in the market, right? People are looking for skills to get jobs. There are players, universities that are supposed to play that role, but they're not playing it. Not all of them, of course, but actually a huge number of them are not playing the role that they should be playing. So we also saw that as a huge opportunity for alternative models to grow. We are a region with a huge percentage of young people. We're living our demographic bonus right now. That's the potential to have a much more productive economy. We are a region that still has huge percentages of informal economy, and talented people that are just not achieving their potential because the labor market is not providing that type of quality job that actually gives you the opportunity to thrive. And I think entrepreneurs, we can play such a pivotal role in that space, bringing in all sorts of new solutions that then can be scaled through larger partners, through government. So yeah, I think the potential is there and it's huge.
And what I would like to add is that as entrepreneurs in LATAM, we are issued to recessions, problems, government, politics. So sometimes when our teams are like, what's happening right now? Are we going to broke? Is something going to happen? We are like, nothing is going to happen, because first, as a startup that has been for a lot of years and founders that have been for a lot of years here, we know what is happening and we know how to react. And for example, what happened to Colombia in politics, this has happened to Peru, to Brazil, to Chile, to Mexico. So it's crazy how we have this kind of personality to affront all these kind of problems, because we are issued to have them everywhere. And as an opportunity, as working with workforce, what we have seen is that with recession, what happened is that many companies from the US reallocate their efforts in Latin America. So they come here in LATAM and they start building big fabrics. They start reallocating as Tesla in Monterrey because of cost. So back then we have a huge opportunity for training, their skills gap, for making them get better opportunities, and this is with education. So what we have seen is these kind of things. And the demand of this skilled labor on tech and in other things are the things that make us, in a recession, have a good mood in Ubits.
It's interesting, the question of why now and why LATAM. I want to kind of you probe a little bit further into the question of ecosystem. Do you need an ecosystem? Because I always thought, okay, places that we've known to grow as a really, really powerful place is because the ecosystem of getting your 10,000 hours of practice is much easier when everybody's around you and learning 24/7. It's the case of Silicon Valley, right? So we all know it, very, very dense around Sand Hill, Palo Alto, all that area, right? San Francisco later on. And I hadn't seen that in LATAM. So there's that, I want you to comment on that, because I see much more than before. I see Sao Paulo and Mexico City being kind of epicenters of ecosystems, especially, tight, like maybe 2 neighborhoods in each of those places or 3 neighborhoods, right? So it's very, very condensed, which in one way it's very positive. The other one that also helps LATAM, and I want you to comment on that as well, is the pandemic has allowed us to kind of have a really decentralized way of working. So it allows us not to be geographically based, but it's kind of orthogonal to those 2 things, right? So I don't know how to reconcile that in my brain, but I do think that both will help LATAM in many, many ways. So why don't you speak to that if you can, on how do you see those 2 benefiting or not?
I can touch on the first one. There's a sentence that we use a lot at Laboratoria when we refer to women in tech, no? And it's you cannot be what you cannot see, and it just speaks to the importance of having role models in different aspects. And I think the ecosystem is absolutely critical for this, no? If you don't even have the reference of what does it mean to be an entrepreneur, to go through that journey, you don't have the possibility to connect with someone that has gone through it, to have a mentor, then it becomes not only really much harder, but it's not even a possibility for so many people, not even a path to consider. And in that sense, I think ecosystems play such a fundamental role. And for example, I come from a relatively small market, no, compared to Mexico or to Brazil. And we always talk with friends in Peru, this envy of how these bigger markets it's easier for them to thrive in many ways. And you see the impact, right? More startups, more capital, more talent. Talent is just such a critical piece, what you were mentioning before. If you have someone that you can hire that has already built something relatively similar in a similar context, that's going to make your life so much easier. So I am a big believer in investing in ecosystems. I think it's an investment that it takes long. It won't pay off like in a year or 2, but if you're building with a more long-term vision, I mean, it's a must, right? I don't think that you can thrive and you can have a thriving community of entrepreneurs without that. And then the pandemic, yeah, I don't know. I don't have the answer. I think that on some ways it's an advantage. Like for us, for example, to be able to hire something very simple, like our JavaScript coaches. We have tons of JavaScript coaches, and that used to be a big bottleneck for our growth because then we need to find them in Lima, right? Or in Santiago or wherever we are. Now we can draw talent from everywhere, and that just makes things so much easier. And even I think these days we've been talking a lot about skills in this conference, not what are the skills that we need for the future. And something that plays a role here is this skill around like cultural, I don't remember the name, but like cultural exposure, to different contexts and settings. And I think this is something that entrepreneurial ecosystems in LATAM, we are managing to do, right? To connect ecosystems throughout various cities and to be able to navigate those different ecosystems so that maybe Colombia and Peru and Chile are not that different from each other, and we can connect and learn and just be a bigger ecosystem with all our efforts.
Yeah, and if I can compliment on that, I think grateful, Mariana, on the way that you put, like having people that have done it before. But I think more than that is about the mindset and having the examples. Like you mentioned, in Peru, you have great technology companies starting there. We invested on Rappi in Colombia in 2016. And like the amount of companies that merge within that same ecosystem in Colombia, because you had the first example, but most of that you have the culture, the mindset of being like a true risk taker, go try all new things. So they have like the happy makers culture there. So I think one side of the equation that really like pushes the mindset of, hey, go, take some risks. And then, of course, capital is a huge help of that. So once you have capital that helps you go and try new things, it's easier. So on that sense, I think what has been happening also is that we have been creating this virtual communities or ecosystem around a few venture capital or a few fellowships or a few angel groups also. So we see more and more founders from our portfolio angel investing in other founders that are early on in the sector, and that helps them a lot to give more examples, help them thrive through the first challenges that they have to overcome in their company. So I think not only physically we see a little bit of concentration in Mexico, São Paulo, in terms of region that you have similar companies or companies in the same building. But I think more than that, we are being able to translate those community and that mindset through our virtual or even the culture within specific examples in each country. So today we have almost more than 28 large tech companies in the region that are generating more tech talent there. So I think those talent is the second generation of founders that already had previous experience and are willing to take more risks through the region and help more the ecosystem.
Yes, and also to add, as founders, you have to be in an ecosystem and you have to have these kind of communities. When we learn a lot from YC like a couple of years ago, because in the past you were taught to not be in an ecosystem because they were going to copy your idea or they were going to be like your competence. And right now in an ecosystem you can know that everyone has your same problems. Like you can have a shoulder where you can cry or you can be happy, and you can understand that being an entrepreneur has some kind of challenges, but you are not the only one. So what is great about the ecosystems in Colombia, in other countries, is that you can understand now that where you are passing, there are some people that already passed, and you can learn all about it. Like everything right now is so open to learn, and it's like a high school for entrepreneurs, like doing that kind of things.
Good points. The information's open and also the demographics opening up. So that's huge opportunity. I see it as very positive. So let me ask you. I mean, I think a lot of the conference here has been around AI and LLMs, large language models, right? And so if you think about that, I don't know if you're sort of experimenting with ChatGPT and all of that, but it's very interesting. I just made 2 investments in AI, one in LATAM, one not in the US. And so one of the questions I wanted to kind of probe on a little bit is, look, a lot of people are building stuff on top of ChatGPT, and the question as an investor is, how differentiated is your language, your LLM on top of that? Because this is ubiquitous, and you have no differentiation if you're just kind of becoming more efficient, unless you have some other secret sauce. So to me, it just doesn't make sense from a defensibility standpoint, unless the LLM is language specific. So I haven't played enough in ChatGPT in Spanish or my horrible Portuguese. But I don't know if you have, and whether you can comment on whether the LLMs will be language specific and whether you can build a moat by being the first ones to I would imagine a lot of the work is being done in English and LLMs, so I don't know how much work has been done in Portuguese or Spanish, but I see it as a competitive advantage if you could kind of jump on it and build an advantage. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that or if it's too early to tell.
I can start on this one. It's a very top of mind topic for us, but it is definitely very early to tell which is going to be the main differentiations or opportunities. What we see, we made our first investment in an AI platform in 2018. From a team from Latin America, and then we were trying to understand, like, okay, what kind of credentials you need to compete in this global market. So all boils down to know the best team and really trust that they would find a way, especially in a market that is super early, and have a quick go-to-market will be very key for them to build also differentiation, because you think about data, network effects is another huge example of how you can build differentiation on top of that. So if we think about the opportunities for that in the region, we see applications a lot, like when you have either privacy or regulation or a very specific data. Language is going to be one of the barriers, but if you have like more context data, for example, we investors in Jus Brasil. They have all the legal data that is very specific per Brazil, very tailored to the local market, so it's very hard to copy that. But it doesn't make sense for them to create their own models because all the big tech probably is going to be fine-tuning that on an exponential level. So finding those opportunities where you can really create those verticalized solutions, but also target to the Latin market. For example, the way that the Brazilians communicate with technology is different probably on the Americans, different probably the Colombian, on the Mexican ones. So trying to find that specific edge that builds a nice interface through the customer, I think would be also an amazing differentiation for that. But not only relying on language, because I think if you don't have a specific use case or something that can create a network effect, within a few years, that's going to be probably outdated already.
Good. I wanted to open up to any questions that you may have, and if not, I have a ton more others, but please raise your hand if you do have a question. If not, I can keep asking.
Thank you. How do you see the entrepreneurial ecosystem in education specifically from a female founder perspective? Have you seen improvement in that?
Okay. In terms of female representation, it's always very hard because we have so few women still, like especially raising more capital, but taking the risks. I think in EdTech specifically, I don't see like a trend, but definitely there is more women coming as a founding team across several industries, fintech, marketplace, logistics, but also education. We have one company in our portfolio that is within education that out of 9 that has 1 woman in the founding team. But that's definitely increasing a lot also within our own portfolio throughout the years, but across segments.
I think we need more women founders, like everywhere. Also in EdTech, for sure. It's again that same principle, right? We need to be visible and be part of inspiring that next generation of women that see in entrepreneurship a career path for them, that can feel confident enough to go out and build a product, raise money, lead a team. And I think so many more amazing things will come out of having more female founders, just because our life experiences, particularly in a region like Latin America, where there's profound gender gaps in absolutely every aspect of our lives, will bring new visions, new ideas, new solutions to the problems that we face ourselves. And I think it's also an amazing way to really grow the skills of that next generation of talent of women working for women-led companies that really can thrive, grow, and then go and build their own companies as well. So I think that's a good question for ecosystem builders, right? What else can we do to specifically support more women founders? Because there's definitely still a bunch of challenges, otherwise we wouldn't be seeing the gap that we still see.
Yes, EdTech has always been men and education also. Like you can see that all of the principals in the universities and in the schools are men, and the ones that are working behind them are women. So it's a huge challenge for education to have more women. I think there's a lot to do as we are not a huge group, but the ones that we are, for example, in Colombia, we are really, we make reunions and we get together and we try to do something. I think what happens is that some women are not like visualized. Like right now, we don't have like all of the spectrum of the women in EdTech. If we had them, maybe we can build a community. But I think there's a lot of opportunities.
And I would say that beyond the entrepreneur, I'll add something that is very present to our fund, is that you also need the ecosystem around it to be women too. So in particular, I'm focused on women VCs that I want to syndicate to, meaning if I do the Series Seed and there's no board yet because it's a convertible or whatever else, the worst thing you could do is just to keep syndicating to the same type of people, because I've been on boards for 7-8 years of companies that went public where it's all the same guys from the same place, the same school, and the groupthink, they don't argue at all because they agree violently with each other on the wrong answer because they don't have a perspective of different perspectives that can truly debate with each other. So number one thing is board composition needs to be well diversified so that you could forget about women and men. It's just diversify your board and don't bring a bunch of VCs to your board that are coming from the same exact background. It just adds a lot of noise to your board and horrible advice. And so I've seen those dysfunctional boards. And so we want to change that. And so board composition is one thing. So the way to fix that is to bring independence early. And so that's one of the things I'd love to work with my companies on. If you bring independence, you bring advisors. Those advisors could be entrepreneurs or could be eventually become VCs or angel investors. And so that adds another member to the board that can bring a different perspective. That's on the board side, but also on the C-level suite, a lot of VPs become entrepreneurs themselves. So bringing a C-level suite that's truly diversified, a co-founding team that's diversified, that's super important. I think 84% of my companies have that. And that's super important because it brings that diversity of thought. And so, to me, that's super critical. Good question.
Thank you. I am curious about what are you building right now? Like, because the three of you, you're like in a later stage, no? But you're builders. So what are you excited about and what you're building right now?
I can start because I'm building something new, so I'm excited. So I'm actually transitioning my role. Laboratoria will continue to grow, but we're starting something new that's called Laboratoria Plus. And we always think like our bootcamp has been the way to support women going like from 0 to 1, so from out of the workforce to their first job in tech and to start careers in tech. And now we're building Laboratoria Plus, which is focused on hopefully supporting women to on going from 1 to 2 to 3 and grow in their careers. And that's also because the gap is persistent. There's not only a gap in entry level, especially when you talk about tech, but then as we start growing in our careers, it's insane. Like if you see particular, like in every industry, in every role, men grow at faster rates than women in their careers. If you go into like tech and product roles, it's like crazy the difference, the gap that you start seeing, right? And that's why when you look over, obviously as people grow, there's few and fewer women in leadership teams. So we're excited about building something to tackle that problem that I am super passionate about, and I think it's also a new phase, no? As builders, we like, I think, to get our hands dirty since the beginning, and it's always an exciting phase.
Right now in Ubits, like we have a lot of challenges. This year it's a great year to build. I cannot tell you, like we have so many things that are going to the market by the half of the year, but what I can say is that we are building a lot of solutions around AI. We have been building that for about, I think, 4 years, and solutions for HR, human resources, people mostly, to make their lives easier. So it's a lot of tools for them to create better content, to create their own content, their own universities, and all around how to build great things for them to make their jobs easier. So it's a lot of work what we are doing, and maybe in the next months you are going to see some changes in what we are going to show you.
Excellent. We have 1.5 minutes. Any one last question? We could do like little rapid fire. All right. So one short answer on they talk about, so why LATAM? Like why LATAM? Why do we need to be here talking about stuff? Why are we significant? You start.
Okay. I think like the two here mentioned that building in Latam is very, very hard. So we have a lot of resilience, and there, like people usually say, if you can build it in Latam, you can build anywhere elsewhere, also in the world. So if you see a lot of geographical similarities with India, way more than we see in the US. So we look more for benchmarks in India, China, or Southeast Asia, then we look for the US, specifically in education, because it's similar challenges, similar costs, a large cost to really distribute a great technology. So I think the challenge is there, the opportunities are huge, and Latam is very, very inefficient in several ways. And with the pandemic that just hit, I think we had an amazing opportunity to really flip the technology adoption, also in education and health, which is another great sector as well. Most challenges, very regulated, but we are getting there.
I'm going to say what I usually say when I am asked this question about women in leadership, for example. It's very simple because we deserve it. And I think as Latin Americans, we deserve it. So we should go and do it.
And what I'm going to say is that you must invest in Latin American people. We have all of the things that can make us be whenever we want to be. The local talent in Latin America is great, and it's accessible, so you can have a great tech team in Latin America with great costs, and it's like the best talent you can have. That's why we have all of our talent, our Ubits talent base in Latin America, great salespeople, great, like with a lot of fire in their veins to work and to be in the challenges. So I think that this is what get us here, the local talent and the operational costs. They are a great mix to build a startup.
Great. Thank you so much. Please give a round of applause. Thank you so much. That was great.